So, we are here for Rebels Reviewed Season 2. Had a little break because we had the Mandalorian Series 3 discussion episodes going on every week. And then, we've got a little bit of quiet time after Star Wars Visions as well. Had a little bit of a couple of weeks to let that kind of fester. And we've got back on the Rebels review train, trying to get Rebels finished before Ahsoka comes out in August. So that's now our own time limit. So we're going to try and do one of these every sort of month or a few weeks. And so Season 2 of Rebels. This for me was the season that when I watched it, it completely changed Rebels for me. This was mainly the last couple episodes. But joining me once again, we've got two individuals, the man who's seen it before once and the Padawan as well, who's never been on this journey before, which is the main reason I'm excited because I just want to hear Maff's reactions. But Dave, how are you doing today, good sir? What was it like rewatching Rebels Season 2? And this was your first rewatch of Season 2, wasn't it?
That's right. So, hey, Mike. Hey, Maff. Normally I'm quite organized with these things, and on this occasion I wasn't. And so I knew we had this coming up, and I kept thinking, yep, I need to start it and just chip away at the season and just enjoy it like a fine wine. But no, I had to scoff it down like a Big Mac because I kind of got to within a couple of days and I thought, shit, I'm going to have to watch this. Half and half, 11 episodes a night, right? Get the Rocky montage music on, no pain, and just burn all the way through it. So I have binged the crap out of this, and like you say, it's my first rewatch, if you like. I'd been through it, and I'd been through it the first time as the first animated show. So I'd watched this before I'd watched Clone Wars, and it was really interesting in my binge hazy memory now to go back, because actually you get so much more from it having seen Clone Wars. Like when I watched it the first time, I'm like, who's this old bugger Rex? I don't care about him, kind of thing. Whereas you get a bit of love from him from the Clone Wars. But also I was like a couple of episodes into this series and I was thinking, oh god, I remember how much I like this. And it was solid, but it's going to be really hard to not just focus on the last two episodes. Yes. Because I think all the way through it is a solid season. And even the kind of little side quest type episodes I didn't mind so much. In a 20-odd episode season, you've got to have some room to breathe there. But I quite like those. But like I say, the last two just amazing, but I shan't say any more on that.
We'll get to those. We probably won't be able to go fully chronologically, but before we delve into that, Maff. So going into this, you're the newbie. You're the one that I'm most intrigued by, because whenever I get people into Star Wars Rebels and wider Star Wars content, I focus on the Vader 2017 comics, and I focus on probably Lost Stars and the High Republic books, maybe Darth Bane, and then with watching stuff, it's Star Wars Rebels, and now probably Andor as well. So Star Wars Rebels. This, obviously, when you watched Series 1, that was the first time you really fully watched, like, not in little bits and pieces, you actually fully committed and watched an animated show. And obviously the first season is clearly aimed at a slightly younger audience, but I feel like the show grows with the audience. And so on to Series 2. So how did you feel? With all honesty, you don't have to sugarcoat it if you didn't enjoy it as much, but like, throughout the series, how did you find it going into Series 2, the sort of middle episode, and obviously as we get to the end, we won't exactly talk about what happened in the end quite yet, but just how was your journey with this series, especially compared to Series 1? But while we wait for his return, he hasn't quite left yet, so I will I'll make a note of this and then I'll somewhat pivot. But with you, Dave, so with Series 2 compared to Series 1, like how did you find it kind of going through? I know you said there's not sort of side quests and things, but as a whole.
Oh, he's gone. Well, I think it's definitely more mature. It almost takes sorry to draw the comparison, but like Harry Potter, it takes a similar trajectory. Yeah, so where that started off and it was really quite childish. Childish is not a great word, but it's aimed at a younger audience. Is a better way to say it. You could imagine coming home from school and this being on the TV. Whereas probably straight from episode 1, it sets its stall out. And it all just kind of blurred in my memory. But when Vader turns up straight away, you're like, I mean, he's just the best baddie in fantasy adventure, isn't it? It's just the best baddie. So when he turns up, you're like, oh, shit's going to go down. But I liked how it kind of, through the season, it tried to evolve those relationships. Again, it's still aimed at a younger audience, I feel, but it was definitely more mature. It tackled things that were more serious. And I felt like in Clone Wars that was already there, but that had like 7 seasons to really, find its feet. Whereas this kind of just got darker as it went on.
Yeah, and obviously you're going into this knowing where this goes from. And I would say that Series 2 for me, the finale, which we keep teasing, the finale is just something that is some of my favourite bits in all of Star Wars. It's just, it's mind-blowing to me. And the funny thing is, I looked through the episodes of Series 3 and Series 4, because I remember certain bits, but I looked through them and I was like, there's a banging episode every, like, couple episodes, and even the ones that are like absolute top tier, they're just like, as you say, they're just good episodes. They're thorough. Like there's a lot of parts of this that I enjoyed a lot more than I remember. I mean, even though I've watched this through twice now and I've rewatched certain parts, like the 4th to last episode, I think it was, where they go to the Jedi Temple and they have those visions. I absolutely adored that. But Maff, you have returned after a smidge of technical difficulties. Maff is back. Here we go. Maff, we've drum roll. It's going on. What did you think of Star Wars Rebels Series 2, the start to finish, how you started it, kind of, and how the journey took you, especially compared to Season 1? Please let us know.
Right, after all that, if I turn around and say that I hate it and I don't want to come back, it's really going to annoy people. I loved it. I really did. I think from going from Season 1 to Season 2, there is a few issues I had to start with with how the characters were. I felt there was a switch between Kanan and Ezra. Ezra seemed to grow up very quickly, and Kanan seemed to be a bit of a whiny bitch. And he was quite frustrating. He just didn't seem to want to get on board with anything. He just wanted to complain. And it was getting a bit annoying at times. I felt that him and Hera had issues all the time. They just seemed to be falling out. It just seemed to take that Ezra role from the Season 1. Then as the season progresses, I think when we get to he goes on a mission with Rex, and I think that's where the big twist is, where he turns and he gets on board with things. But I do think I know it's aimed at age 6+, it just seemed quite mature at times. They do show loss. They do show that the rebels are losing. They're losing pilots. They're losing spaceships. It's not sugar-coated. It's not kind of, oh, everything's fine, don't worry about it. It's not that. It's very much kind of, you're on the losing side, and that, especially having Vader in this as well. I mean, there's issues there. I feel Ahsoka. This is my first. I've watched Mandalorian, so I've met Ahsoka before, but this is my first real introduction of Ahsoka. I've not watched Clone Wars, which I think after watching this, and once we get through the next 2 seasons, I'm going to go and watch Clone Wars, because I'd like to know more about Ahsoka and that relationship that she obviously had with Anakin. Obviously, she lies to them all. She doesn't tell them who Vader is until further down the line. But I do feel that there is more of a maturity for this season. Everyone seems to grow up a lot more. But yeah, as I say, I did have issues to start with. I did kind of think, Kanan's really going to get to me. And then there is that turning point, and then at the very end, which we won't talk about last 2 episodes yet, there's a major thing with Kanan there, which I kind of, it shows how much he's grown, and it was a coming of age of both of them, I think, through the season. I do feel Zeb took a big step back this season. Hera seemed to kind of step forward a little bit more. There's a major episode with her in this, her and her father, which I think, again, I'd like to know a bit more about that. I'm hoping further down the line we're going to learn a bit more there. But again, this season left me with lots of questions, and I know, speaking with you, you've said they will answer them by the end. But yeah, I think there's lots of little things in here that I've just that Leonardo DiCaprio meme where you point at the screen, that I want to know that, I want to see that, I know that bit, and yeah, it's just to the point. Once we probably finish this, I'll probably start season 3 this week. So I'm going to blast through that fairly quickly because, as I say, it's for a children's cartoon, so to speak. It seems as good. I mean, I loved Andor, but I'm enjoying this just as much.
Yeah, it's one of those, and the series get better, I'd say, as well. I will say the finale of this is, in my opinion, one of the greatest pieces of content in entirety of Star Wars, in every single level of it, and it's hard to top that, but there are episodes that I would say are even to this. So it's not just downhill from here, it's actually uphill, if you can believe it. And it's one of those things I always say to people, it's one of the reasons I want to do the show, is just because Rebels is probably the show that the least amount of people watch, aside from like Resistance, but I don't rate that show as much. But like, Rebels is phenomenal. It's some of the best Star Wars that exists. And Clone Wars is also phenomenal. But I find the problem is with Clone Wars, you have to watch the Clone Wars movie that isn't that good, and then Series 1, which is really slow, apart from like 6 episodes. Then Series 2 is pretty good. It's got some quite highs. And then you get to sort of Series 3 and 4, where some major antagonists come into play. And Series 4 of Clone Wars is absolutely phenomenal, as is like Series 5 is great, so is Series 6. And then Series 7, the finale of that, is some of the best Star Wars that exists as well. It's just... And the thing is with it is Clone Wars, you have to watch so much. And I always want to push people to watch Rebels first, because although there are elements that you would want to know about, for example, Ahsoka and Rex and Hera and her father, like certain elements of those, you want to know more about them. But when you go back and watch them in Clone Wars, what I found is when you watch Clone Wars the first time, it's much harder to get into things, but also you don't have that connection to Ahsoka immediately. I think in this show it shows you who she becomes, and then you're like, for me it's like the way a lot of people actually want to watch the films is you watch the originals first, then you go back to a prequel, then you kind of go on. And I think it's similar with Rebels. I think Rebels is the best animated Star Wars. I think it's some of the best Star Wars. And I think if I'm trying to get someone into animated Star Wars, Rebels is the place to begin. Because especially with all the original trilogy connections, even from Series 1, but in this, we had Lando in it, we obviously have Vader, we have Leia come into it. Like, we have these things which don't take away from the plot, and they're not just boring cameos. They add to the lore of Star Wars while having a driving force and a reason for all of the characters and all of the things that are going on in the plot. So because of those elements, Series 2 is something I'm always excited about, because there's slower parts, but as you say, Maff, with Ezra and Kanan, their growth as master and apprentice, the way they both change together, and it's encapsulated in one of the final episodes where they do things in tandem. They stop kind of fighting against each other, and I think that this is a series of growth. The first series was an introduction. This is of growth. Series 3 is more a series, and this is no spoiler or anything, but for growth for some of the characters that we didn't get to see quite as much in this. In the Ghost crew, Ezra and Kanan have been quite front-facing and stuff. We've had a bit about Hera, but we haven't had as much about Sabine and Zeb. We've had little snippets. We've had little tastes, but their stories get more flushed out as we go on, while the others still get a lot to go on. Obviously, how the series ended and things, there's a lot to it. So I want to ask you, Dave, apart from the finale, were there any moments or things that kind of stuck out to you that you either did or didn't enjoy in this series, in this kind of watch?
I think the one thing I do really enjoy, I have to say, is the fact that it's all the original Star Wars sound design, so it all feels like the movies, so again, you just get used to watching live action stuff, don't you? And so watching a cartoon, essentially, it takes my brain a little while to recalibrate my expectations. But I think the music and the not just the music, but the sound effects as well. I think because they're so good, it just immerses you in that Star Wars world again. And so that's, I think that's really good. One of the things that, and I'm going to mention it now just because I'll probably forget it by the time we get nearer to the end of the season. I was saying about I like some of the quieter episodes. One of the episodes I really like is the Forgotten Droid, which gets slated on IMDb. I'm sure. Well, it's 7.4. Okay, so not really slated, but you look at the previous episode, the Shroud of Darkness, that gets a 9.1. But I just loved that interaction between Chopper and the droid. And you're saying about the it being more mature. I think the great thing that this show does, I think a kid can watch it and enjoy, the things that are happening on the screen and the silly things that are happening. But it's still talking about, this was part of the alliance, or these were separatists before, or something, and it's making all these callbacks, so it is properly in the canon. It's not just throwaway. I remember when I was a kid, they had a cartoon called Droids, but a lot of this stuff was just absolutely throwaway. It didn't matter. Nothing of weight ever happened. Whereas here, you feel like it did. And like I say, just getting back to that Forgotten Droid episode, I mean, it was basically a C-3PO Alan Rickman, wasn't it? It was almost Alan Rickman out of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy,
Marvin,
if you ever seen
Megan said the exact same thing.
Paranoid android, and he's so fucking miserable.
AP5.
I love it. Yeah. And I tell you what, I'd forgotten that when he kind of makes his sacrifice and for a moment you think he's dead, I was genuinely gutted, and then he comes around and then he starts getting annoyed at Chopper. He's like, that's a waste, that is. I'm like, that's more of the C-3PO coming out. So no, I loved that episode, but there were all different ones. We've seen about Zeb, and I agree, he's kind of got a little bit of a backseat, but you did get to explore, you got hints at his past and, his responsibilities, that he feels like he fell short of. And, he meets the other species, Lasats, that's the one. And he's kind of disappointed with where they've gone. And so I think there are little clues about Zeb's character there. And actually, I remember I was listening to, I can't remember who's on with you, the Andor episode, because when I saw him pop up in Andor, I was like, holy fucking shit, it's Zeb. I was going nuts. And in the episode, you were just like, yeah, there was a Zeb cameo or something. And I was like, wow, I was going fucking nuts. So I love Zeb. I think he's great.
Zeb is incredible. And so, Mav, what did you think of some of the newer characters? We've got obviously AP5, as Dave mentioned. What do you think about him? And then from there, what do you think of sort of Rex and Ahsoka and any of the other characters that have kind of got more of a front seat?
AP5, it was one of those characters that all of a sudden, we only knew him for 20 minutes. It's about 23 minutes episode. And you don't realize how much you kind of start to feel for him. And that point when he makes that sacrifice, and that you kind of think, is that it? And I actually felt really bad for him then. I thought, what Dave was saying, I think what's good about this is there's so many familiarities to episode 3, 4, and 5. You've kind of got Chopper and AP5, which is R2D2 and C-3PO, and that there's so many little elements throughout this season that you kind of link to the other films that have been out there. It's like, I want to get into it later, but Ezra is very much Anakin Skywalker. And that, especially a certain thing right at the very end, there's an eye color change. And that they're walking this fine line, and they're kind of, people have complained that sometimes they have retold the story of, how many Death Stars have we had, and that they're doing it in this, but in a better way, and that they are kind of retelling certain characters with new characters, but giving a better spin on it. As I say, we've got Chopper and AP5, which is like a C-3PO, and then and again, we only knew him for a short time, and obviously he's joined them now. But you really did feel for him, and that, and especially the point when he says he's my friend, and you think, wow, that's such Chopper's reached out. Chopper's reached out to him, and he's realised that I've got a friend here, and it's amusing. Chopper just beeps and boops, so AP5's doing all the talking. So it's just one. It's a narrative that's going through, but it works so well. I think that's what R2D2 and C3PO really worked well, because there was a conversation, and though it's a bit like I'm Groot, everyone knows what I'm Groot means, and that they all seem to understand that language. We listen to R2D2 or Chopper, and you're getting to the point where you kind of understanding what he's saying because of how how the other characters are talking back to you, in them words are kind of fitting into your head.
What you say about them is completely right. I agree, and it's one of those great things, certain characters that can really strike a chord even when they don't really have much dialogue. But a character that I'm intrigued by your opinion of is Rex, because did you have any idea who Rex was or anything like that going into the show?
Vaguely. I'm aware of there is the Bad Batch, and I'm aware that people have mentioned Rex before, so I don't know who he is really, but I'm aware that there is a show about him, which again, this will be something that I'll have to try get into at some point. But this last month or so has been taken up by Star Wars, whether I'm either watching Rebels, Young Jedi with my youngest son, been playing the Star Wars game. It just seems to be everything Star Wars at the moment. And I feel that's going to be my life for the next 6 months. I'm trying to catch everything up.
Yeah, it gets you.
It does. It's nice, the fact, growing up, Star Wars came out when kind of just before I was born, but I grew up and that's kind of what I was into. There's a big break and then we get episode 1, 2, and 3, which they're not as bad as what I first kind of remember them being, and that, but there's been big gaps, and it's nice to kind of feel that I can go back to, and I feel like I'm going back to my childhood and enjoying them that way again, with so much that's coming out. Even to the point I've started reading the comics, and that there's a lot more Star Wars out there than what sometimes you realise. And now, fortunately, there's certain people that a certain person I know who kind of keeps pestering me about it also, and that. But that's why we're doing this podcast, because it's you want to share, you want to bring people into this universe, so because there's so much there, and it's not just the Skywalker or Vader. I know that Rebels has Vader in it this season, but I think they use him really well. He's there. He's scary. You realise how scary he is. We had that in Obi-Wan, where there was a point where going to Obi-Wan, when he killed the child, you realise how dark Darth Vader is. Through this season, you realise that Vader, he was taking no prisoners. And although Kanan and even Ezra, at the point when he says like, "I'm not scared of you," and that, and Vader even comments, he says, "Well, you'll die, but with a bit more respect."
You'll die braver than most.
That way, yeah. You realise that he is dark. A lot of people remember Vader because he does that flip it. He switches it and he saves Luke at the end. Spoilers, sorry. But Vader's not a good guy. He's really not a good guy. And that, again, reading the comics, there's things going through there which I'm starting to see a different side of Vader as well. But although he's following what the Empire's telling him, he's also trying to work out what's going on. There's people that are going to replace him, so he decides to, take out 6 people, which he nearly does. But yeah, it's like I said before, it's quite mature. There's a lot more going on in this season, and if you're saying the seasons get better and better, and that, you know, I mean, I can't wait to get into season 3, and that, because I felt this ended on a bit more of a cliffhanger and more of what's to come. But yeah, I think your question was who are the new characters that I really enjoyed. Rex, yeah, I love Rex. Wolf was a bit of a dick, but I got why he did what he did. I can't remember who the third one. Gregor. He just seemed a bit of a bumbling fool, but you know, I mean, I'm surprised they didn't come with Rex. I thought they would have done, but that was a good episode. Again, I've heard of the characters, but I don't really know them. But I've enjoyed Rex's. I think he's been a good addition to the crew because I think he made Kanan see things in a better way, and that unfortunately he may not see things as well anymore. And that, but again, I think they needed him in there to bring Kanan out of this slump that he seemed to have gone into. For I'm not sure why he just seemed to be a petulant child, and that I don't want to join the rebellions. You know, I don't want to do it. He just seemed to be, you know, dragging his feet all the time, and I don't know why. And then there's a switch, and now he's really pushing Ezra. There's a line where him and Ezra are training, and Kanan has to go at him about turning his back on him. He says, you know, you never turn your back on your enemy. He's like, you're not my enemy. But, you know, I don't know if that's something that will come further down the line, that maybe they'll end up having to fight each other and that. But he's really pushing Ezra so much. But again, it's good to see these two now working with the Force powers. You know, that there's the Spider Base one where they use their Force powers to push Sabine and that, which maybe push her a bit too far. But again, it's good to see them both working together. You know, which, to be fair, we've not really seen Jedi's working together that much. I'm sure there are, you know, in Clone Wars, obviously we've got Obi-Wan and Anakin who are working together, but I've not seen that. So it's nice to see this different aspect of the Jedi. I'm trying to think. There is is it Kestra?
Oh,
is it Sabine's friend?
Sabine's friend. I've got her name written down somewhere in my absolutely gigantic barrel of notes, but I can't find it at the moment. I can't remember exactly what her name was. But yes, the friend of, I'll look it up in a sec. The friend of Sabine. She's in the one episode, isn't she? And then she comes back a little bit sort of towards the end, has kind of turned. That's like one of those teasers. I think that with this show as well, what it does in a lot of what we've seen, it's been teasing stuff. You know, we've had, you know, I think one episode I really enjoyed was the Zeb focus episode, as Dave said, about the Lasat people, because again, yeah, this show, although it's okay for 6+, I think the demographic is probably around 10 to 12-year-olds, I'd say, in general. That was kind of the first thought when making this, and it kind of grows as you go on. But even then, this genocide is mentioned more than once. You've got the genocide of Zeb's people, the Lasat, and that's like a really dark, horrendous thing that they do lightly kind of talk about. And then you've also got Geonosis, where they go there and they can't find any life signs, and there's these rumors that where the Geonosians gone, they couldn't have just wiped out anything, and that you don't know yet what that's all about. You know, and with, you know, the Lasat people, there's a little bit more there, and there's just all these little threads that are slowly being sort of plucked and things, and there's just so many different elements that I enjoyed so much of this, and watching it again is just so much fun. And, you know, you've got the B-Wing that's introduced as well. Sorry, go ahead, Maff.
The Genos, that has been mentioned in a different show. It got mentioned in Andor. Her name's...
In Andor, I think it's only a passing mention.
It's mentioned that there's the mass genocide wiping out of them all.
That's the Gormans, I think, and that's a slightly.
That's the calm. I thought
it's something similar to Geonosian, but it's not quite the
Right.
same. But it gets again. There's a lot of Clone Wars connection to this. It's another reason
Right.
I like to show the. It's got definitely connections to Andor, but I think Andor Series 2 is going to have a lot more connections to Rebels than this because the massacre of it's something like the Gormans. I'll have to double check what it's called, but it's not quite the Geonosians. But Dave, we'll have one more little bit and then we'll delve into the finale. But Dave, obviously. I just want to ask, when you watch Clone Wars and things, did you like the order in which watching Rebels and then Clone Wars, or did you, like, after hindsight, like, would you have preferred to watch Clone Wars first out of interest? Because I'm intrigued, because I can't remember the exact order I watched it. I think I tried Clone Wars, wasn't a fan. Watched Rebels, that got me into animation more, and then I went back. So I've kind of forced everyone to do what I wanted to do. But with you, because obviously you're more of an original trilogy fan, but the Clone Wars make the prequels better. Like, what are your kind of thoughts around that element?
And you've just very quickly made the point that I was going to make to Maff, because I don't know if we've spoken about this, but and please, you want to go back to Clone Wars. Honestly, I'm an original trilogy person, was disappointed by the prequels. Clone Wars makes the prequels better. It absolutely does. It makes you enjoy what's going on. It's a more decompressed storytelling, because if you think about it, you go from Revenge of the Sith to A New Hope. Rogue One was sort of a standalone side kind of mission, but that through line, so it's a massive leap to go from there, and it kind of explains more before Revenge of the Sith and a little bit sort of into it, and it honestly, it made me like the prequels more. But to Mike's point, am I glad or would I have watched it in a different way? Well, I tried to watch I did watch the Clone Wars movie, and would not recommend that to anyone. Unless you do. I mean, Matthew got a little in there. That is probably the right age. It is, if you think about how young the audience must have been for season 1 to get enjoyment. So, like you say, 6 plus 10, whatever it is. The Clone Wars movie was younger than that, really, and it's not. There's not much in there, or I didn't find much for an adult. So that put me off Clone Wars completely, because I just thought, well, if that's it, I'm not going to that again. And I think it was through you, Mike, that was saying about Rebels. I was like, right, okay, I'll give this a go. And I think after about episode 3, I seem to remember you forget the fact that it's animated. And so I think the fact that watch Clone Wars first, then Rebels, then the Clone Wars series. I'm quite happy, apart from I could take or leave the movie. Watching Rebels before Clone Wars, I think Rebels is a more consistent and obviously it's shorter, it's less daunting, it's just 4 seasons, so quite happy that I did that. And also you're thinking, well, where does this happen in the timeline? So even though having watched Clone Wars before, it rewards you, because like Ahsoka, Rex turning up and whatever, it rewards you for those cameo characters that come in. But I think I'm okay with watching Rebels before Clone Wars. And again, what it means is when I've watched Clone Wars and all the seasons now, and come back to rewatch Rebels, I get more from it than I did the first time.
Mm-hmm. And did you notice? This is a deep cut, and this will mean nothing to Maff, so I'm sorry. But did you notice Morai, the bird in the finale?
No.
Okay, well, it's to do with the Mortis arc of Clone Wars. That's why the Force gods. So it's to do with that.
Right.
But, it actually does
okay.
show up. Morai does actually show up in Mandalorian as well in live action. It's.
I feel like you could watch through these entire series 3 to 4 to 5 times and notice bits each time. I think there's so much going on. It really is so well thought out. And the fact that it can get so much into it and be, as it is, and pander to a younger audience as well, it's an amazing job they've done.
It is. It's incredible, and I'm so happy that you've both been enjoying it. And the Morai is a convor. It's a green bird sort of thing. But don't worry, it'll come up again. But one more thing, actually, I realised I didn't mention, which is a character that I'm very excited for Maff to have met, which is a very underrated character and is actually one of my favourite characters in anything.
I know who you're going to say.
It's Hondo Ohnaka. What did you think of the pirate Hondo Ohnaka?
Amazing. What a dick.
This dialogue is some of the best in the whole show. It's just incredible.
It's amusing the fact that he is just happy to play both sides, and that I think in might be the third time we meet him, there's a bit where he helps him out, and then 30 seconds later he's telling the stormtroopers where he's gone, and then he's locking it, and he just flips both sides, and he walks away with both sides thinking he's done him a favour. And that he's just so amusing, and the fact that he's such a selfish character, but it works really well for him, and it works for everybody else, to be fair. And everyone else, again, he's such a brilliant con man, because everyone just walk away thinking, well, he's just helped us, so he's a good guy. And that, but yeah, he's one of the other things that I've written down though. There is something else I do want to talk about.
Do it.
The purrgils.
Yes.
That was. You say that the last two episodes are something special, but I really, really enjoyed the purrgil episode. Still don't really understand exactly what's going on there. Again, this is another one where you say it'll sort itself out, but I don't know whether him touching the purrgils, when Ezra touched the purrgils, whether it's like it's unlocked something in him or something, but obviously he's able to talk to the animals now. Dr. Doolittle. But that connection that he seems to have got, I think that was one of the things that also changed Ezra. He'd already grown up a fair bit, but now he is so much into the cause. Even with the spider creatures, he kept trying, because this is where there's a bit of a conflict with him, because although we do see that, I think when he touches in the last episode, or the second to last episode, when he touches the pyramid and it unlocks it all for the Sith temple. Obviously, there's a dark side to Ezra, but he's also seemed to be fighting because there's a light side to him of not wanting to fight as well, which I think that's the Anakin kind of thing there. There's, Anakin was, I think he was too easily swayed in the films. And that obviously he went from being such a nice guy to, I'm just going to kill a load of younglings. It's like, when he kind of comes out, a little kid says, is there something, Master Skywalker, is there something wrong?
Almost.
Yeah.
So honestly, it does such a better job, because it is a massive switch, isn't it? It's like, I'm wrestling with my feelings. Let's massacre a bunch of kids.
Yeah, it's complete out of context. It didn't really make sense.
You watch the Clone Wars and you get to see the gradual changing of perspective of Anakin, and how he does certain things that he shouldn't be doing, but they yield the results that everyone wants. And the struggle he has as the Clone Wars rage on for 3 years, because that's how long they're on for. And with the growth thing with Ezra as well, is that each season of the Clone Wars is loosely a year. So although the finale of the last episode and this kind of connected, between each episode there's normally been several days, if not weeks, unless they specifically say yesterday blah 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 happened. So these 22 episodes, if you think about it, it's like 1 or 2 weeks per episode. That's about a year. Yeah. So it's a progressive thing, and you see these characters change, and you see Kanan change his tune, both how he's teaching Ezra, but also his him with Rex. But yet you see Ezra's growth, because he, in the first series, he was really struggling to connect with animals. And that's one thing that the Sith can't really do. They can't connect. They can force an animal to do its will, but they can't really connect with an animal in the same way. It's one of the kind of things about it. And with Ezra in this series, as time goes on, he connects with more and more. And as you say, Maff, he's trying to connect. The spider things are called the Kripkna. horrible things. They're not dissimilar to what you see in Mandalorian, because both the Mandalorian season 2, episode 2, spider creatures in that and this are both based on Ralph McQuarrie concept art. And in fact, there's a little scene when you see Ezra in the last episode, second to last, saying goodbye to Zeb before he goes off with Kanan and Ahsoka. Actually, I think it's the end of the 3rd episode. Zeb has got a poster where he's got he's leaning back and he's listening to music and stuff, and he's looking over the sunset. There's a poster which is actually Ralph McQuarrie concept art. It's which is quite fun. But there's so many elements of this, like with the purrgil stuff. I love it. Megan loves that episode as well. That's one of my favorites because it's very whale orientated, very much like the ocean, and it's this connection thing, and just Ezra growing as a person and growing his connection to the Force and being able to use it in different ways. And you can see Kanan is he's slowly evening to where Kanan's kind of is, because Kanan never got that formal training and things, and Ezra's quite strong in the Force. And seeing them together is it's amazing. It's one of my favorite Star Wars duos. And when you see Clone Wars and things, you will see a lot of that kind of dynamic in a different way. And it's just amazing. But before we get to the finale, Dave, what do you think of, because I haven't asked about you, of Hondo Ohnaka or anything else before we delve into the finale?
So, I mean, Hondo, I just can't get behind him. He's such a knob. And I think I enjoyed his character more this time because I kind of know where he's coming from. But I don't like those type of characters. But I mean, I guess he is such a chancer, isn't he? He's just out for himself. And, I thought Ezra, he seemed to be wrestling with, does he like him or not? But, he's just absolutely taking him for a ride as much as possible, So I know there's a lot of love for Hondo and what he brings and stuff, but I can't get behind him. What I want to say, actually, before we get into the finale, another one of my favorite episodes was the Honorable Ones. And that was where, it's basically a survival episode for Zeb and Callus. And I really like that. I like the fact that the enemy. Oh no, I guess that's not the. What is the enemy mine? Do you remember that one, Maff?
I do.
The 80s.
It's strange that that was my pick for the VHS.
Yeah. Was it your pick? Was it?
Yeah.
Oh,
It is very much enemy mine.
Yeah.
I was going to mention because that was quite an interesting. Sorry to jump in. That was quite an interesting one because you see Callus, he looks like he's changing his mind on what he believes. And I mean, whether that comes into play further down the line, but there does seem to be a bit of a, maybe, it's like that meme, are we the bad guys? And that,
are we the baddies?
Yeah. He seemed to have that though. He seemed to kind of think, hang on a minute. Maybe what I've been sold is wrong. And maybe, what these guys are doing. Zeb is very honourable. Zeb could have killed him several times. And even Zeb says, look, if we're going to fight, I want you at full capacity. I don't want to just wipe the floor with you. And I think that's left quite a lasting impression on Callus. Now, again, I don't know what's going to come of that, whether they do something with it or not. But it was a nice episode of the fact that, again, it's character development there in this little animation and that, but it stays with you. There's 20 odd minutes of something that kind of things, it makes you rethink a lot of things there. It makes you rethink how Callus actually is. Is he as much of a bad guy as what he was? He's come across all the time as, he took out the Lasats and he was this big warrior, but now he's questioning everything, which is what the season seems to be doing. It answers things and it's thrown out even more questions for me to kind of think, well, what's going to happen next? And that's why I kind of want to get into season 3, to be honest.
It's like, guys, finish up the conversation. I want to go watch it now. Sorry, Dave, is there anything else you want to add? And I want to throw in a word here that we haven't talked about as well. It's Mandalorian stuff as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, just on that point there, I mean, I genuinely think if you didn't have Rebels, you wouldn't have got Andor. because, especially in that original trilogy, there's very little grey that's explored. It's very much the light side and the dark side, and that's it. And these kind of episodes, both sides, both Zeb and Callus, both think they're doing the honourable and right thing, and they're not doing it just to be arseholes or because they're inherently evil, but on the sides that they're on, that's kind of the message that they're understanding, from their environment and stuff. So I do think it was a really clever episode. And so, like I say, I don't actually have the memory where I remember where Callus's arc goes, so I can get to enjoy where that goes. But again, it does seem to have planted the seeds there. The other thing that I think Maff actually mentioned about Ahsoka lying, I thought it was a little bit ambiguous. I thought when it was in the first couple of episodes, wasn't it? She seemed to realize that it was Anakin, but then when she was asked, "Did you know who it was?" she was like, "No," and I was like, "Oh, I'm not sure I believe you," and it wasn't really conclusive whether it was one way or the other. But I definitely left that second episode thinking, yeah, she's hiding something there. But no, like I say, really, really solid season all the way through, just outshone by the last couple of episodes.
Yeah. Oh, go. So, Matt, go ahead.
I think we've hardly mentioned her really. Ahsoka is such a big thing in this season, and how much of a badass she really is. When she takes on the fifth brother and seventh sister so easily, and that. But then I didn't realize she's not a Jedi anymore. She's denounced that now. I don't know again whether that's something. I don't know if Ahsoka's going to appear further down the line or not. Because I do remember seeing something where I think Vader goes back to the temple, where I'm assuming what we're going to get into with what happened with Ahsoka, and he finds a lightsaber but no Ahsoka. But I do know that obviously with Andor, was it? Yeah, no, Mandalorian.
Mando, yeah,
going to appear there. Again, the timeline's a little bit all over the place. And I did see a map earlier, and I thought, oh, that explains things a bit better, and I forgot what it was now. I know this is all before the Battle of Yavin.
Battle of Yavin, but yeah, pretty close. But yeah, it's one of those with Ahsoka is a badass. She can take on like anyone, and if you watch Clone Wars, you get to see why and things. But I will not confirm or deny anything that you've just said for any of your predictions. That's not what I'm going to do.
Such a great line, though, isn't it? Such a great line where she just says, "I'm no Jedi," because they think they're safe. They're like, "Oh, honorable Jedi." Nope, guess again.
Yeah. And there's the book Ahsoka, which I have behind me here, and it explains how she gets her white lightsabers as well. And I'll give you a hint, it's from being an Inquisitor. So it's it's shown in the Tales of the Jedi as well. Because you haven't seen those, have you, Maff? The Tales of the Jedi shorts.
I started watching them, but again, the problem is there's so much to watch. Because then I started watching Visions, because I thought, oh, I'll see if I can catch up with the Visions before you did the Visions episode. But then it's just trying to balance everything. I thought, let's get Rebels done, and then because there's a Rebel shorts as well, so there's like 6-7 episodes.
Don't watch them. They're intros. You know the Young Jedi Adventure shorts. They're like the preview for before the show comes out. So then one of them is just like a 3-minute thing about Ezra like stealing fruit. It's just a little tiny way to introduce the characters. If you watch that after finishing all of Rebels, you'd be like, "What is that?" So the shorts are just little previewy things. But I want to note as well, one of my favorite elements of this, I touched upon it earlier, was the third to last episode, Mystery of Chopper Base. That's pretty good. I did enjoy that one. But the one before that, where they go to the Jedi Temple, I didn't write down the episode names, but then the three of them go off and they go back to Lothal and they open up the temple and they find another entrance and they go in there and they all have different Force visions. And I am a sucker for two things in Star Wars: One of them is Force visions, and the other thing is Order 66 montages. I don't care. I know people complain about them. I don't give a shit. More, I want every single Jedi that have been named. I want to see how they survived Order 66. You know, I want to see Quinn.
Who complains about Order 66?
Online, a lot of people say when
Really?
it was in Mando, they're like, "Do we need more Order 66 montages?"
Yes.
Loads of people online saying it, and I'm like, "No,
No one knows.
I want more. I want Quinn and Voss's survival story. I want every Jedi that we've not seen been killed yet. I want to see how they survived." But that and Force Vision stuff, like there's an episode arc specifically in Clone Wars all about Yoda and Force visions, and it's very intense, and I love it. And there's a whole Force God episode as well, which is arc, and it's incredible. And there's loads of Force vision related things in that. I love those elements of Star Wars. I love that idea. And in that episode, you got to see all three people have different visions they needed. You had Ezra talking to Yoda, and I love seeing Yoda in Star Wars. I think whenever they bring him back, they always use him tastefully. I think in the sequel trilogy, when he's in The Last Jedi, perfect. I think when he's in Rebels, in this episode, and then in Season 1, perfect use of him. Small, mild, he's still on Dagobah, he's just reaching out with the Force because he's so powerful, and in little ways, he's finding ways to help and still train the future generation of Jedi, because that's what Yoda was doing for hundreds of years. Like, you read the High Republic stuff, apart from going on a couple of detours, he is training younglings. That's what everyone's been trained by Yoda at some point. That's the general idea of the last 9, or probably the last 600-700 years of the Jedi from Skywalker Saga backwards. And so Ezra gets that. And Kanan, he gets his own training, you know, with you don't always have to fight. Sometimes you have to not fight, and that's how you win. And then that's sort of a link to what happened in the finale as well. But with Kanan's Force vision, he went to, like, he has a Force vision of going to the Jedi Temple and fighting off Jedi Temple guards and seeing the Inquisitor, the Grand Inquisitor, who used to be a Jedi Temple guard, and kind of fight this Force vision of him and learn these lessons. And that comes back in the end of this episode. And you get Ahsoka. That's the episode where she was trying to deny the fact she could sense Anakin and Vader. She was trying not... I don't think she specifically knew. I think that she didn't want to believe it. You know, like if you hear a friend has been, you know, done for murder, essentially, he's been like, oh, you hear in the news that a friend of yours you haven't seen in a little while, if they've been arrested for something horrendous, you're like, really? Oh, there's that, especially if they're very close to you, there's that part of you that's like, that couldn't be it. And when you see Clone Wars and things, and you see Ahsoka and Anakin's relationship, there is so much there. And so her denying it, you get a lot better sense of what that's all about. And I think that's going to be explored in the Ahsoka series as well, to a degree. I have a theory about that, but I'll get into that in the finale of Rebels Read, or maybe a little preview episode of Ahsoka. I haven't figured it out, but I have thoughts. But like, it's when in this episode, the one I'm referring to with the Force visions, she has the vision and she can't escape it. And the Force, the Temple, everything is literally saying to her, Anakin is Darth Vader. Stop looking away from it. You have to accept this. And she screams out, and then she's just there by herself. And you just get that moment, and you're like, oh, she can't look away. And then she leaves the temple, and just as she leaves, she turns and sees Yoda, and they give each other a little nod. And because Maff, she knew Yoda as well, fairly well. So there's all these layers of things of like, you want to get to know Ahsoka more. Clone Wars has got your back, you know, it's those sort of things. So I just want to ask what both your opinions were on that Temple episode, and then we'll get into the finale. Keep teasing the finale, just like this season teases other Star Wars content. Clone Wars over here, Future Rebels here. What else have we got going? But Maff, what did you think? Actually, no, I'll go for Dave first, and then Maff, I'll come to you about the finale. Dave, what did you think of the 3 Jedi visions and stuff, and that episode in general?
Yeah, it was good, and it goes to the point I was saying before about like the music being the same, some of the relationships, you know, being very familiar as well. And this one, you know, its roots were in the Dagobah scene, weren't they, in Empire Strikes Back? You know, this is almost inspired by that. So, yeah, I thought it was good. I thought it was solid. I think, was that the one where I think Kanan, the room he was in, I thought, Christ, that looks like the Matrix. You know, when Neo learns Kung Fu.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think I hadn't really joined that up. Yeah, so maybe you're right. Maybe Ahsoka didn't really know, you know, or she kind of felt it, you know, that Anakin was Vader, but didn't want to believe it
Not
until that moment. Yeah.
And that's the
Yeah,
Obi-Wan
that's true.
series. That's a lot what the series, I think. Like, a lot of people, like Obi-Wan, the finale in Obi-Wan, spoiler alert, but I imagine most people listening to this have seen that. The finale of Obi-Wan, Vader and Obi-Wan fight again. And the battle is it's amazing. It's not perfect, but it's amazing. And visually, with the way they do the lights and things, it's absolutely incredible. And people praise that. And I'm like, yeah, it's great. It's great. But Rebels did it first, okay?
Yeah.
Let's be clear here. Rebels did it first in the finale. So, Maff, if you are okay for us, we're going to delve into the finale unless there's anything else you want to add before.
Yeah, well, this will go into. Let's go back to that because what they're doing Obi-Wan in the Kenobi series, that fight, there's the bit where you see part of the helmet gets smashed away, and he says a certain line. That's all from Rebels.
Yeah,
and that's what Ahsoka kind of does with Vader. What happens in Kenobi with the fight between Obi-Wan and Vader, it happens here with Ahsoka and Vader. And I watched it and thinking, oh, that's so much like that. And then you realise, no, this is all before. And they're retelling stories over and over again, but in better ways. Although I do think the fight with Ahsoka is probably a bit better than the fight that Kenobi has. Ahsoka is, again, she is just so good. And that, considering she's up against, because Anakin was her master, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So, considering she's up against her master, and even the fight, I mean, Vader, are we just going to go straight into the... Do you want to start off into the...
I'll start at the beginning, if you're willing. We can kind of rewind back, and we'll start. So this is the finale thing. And I will say, Maff, just for your own reference, anyone else who's listening along, with Rebels, my recommendation would be watch all of Rebels, then watch all of Clone Wars, then watch Tales of the Jedi, the 6 episodes there about Dooku and Ahsoka, then watch Bad Batch, just in case I forget to say that in the future, okay? So Rebels, Clone Wars, Tales of the Jedi, Bad Batch. Tales of the Jedi is easy, it's only 6 episodes, and they're all quite short. But so the 2-part finale of this, Twilight of the Apprentice, it's about Ahsoka, Kanan, and Ezra going to Malachor, the Sith homeworld. And on the way there, Kanan and Ahsoka talk about it. It's like, it's only in legends. And they go, oh, well, there's some truth in legends. And I think there's like, oh, because this is around the time that the Disney canon reset was going on. So I like to think, and also Dave Filoni always takes stuff from legends. I say takes, he uses it. It's what it's there for. It's got its own continuity, but any legend stuff can become canonized as long as it fits in with the new canon. So there's little elements of that, and Sith stuff hasn't really been explored in the canon very much. And this is, you get a taste of it. And it's again that grayness where they go in, and Ezra, a lot of this series is about winning and beating the enemy, and defeating. And like Kanan and Yoda and Ahsoka at different times are all saying, you can't just focus on winning, because that's not what really happens in war. That's not, you don't win. You just keep surviving. And that's what Kanan says. He's like, you need to survive, not win. You don't beat your enemy. You beat the enemy by living. That's kind of the lessons he's trying to teach Ezra. And Ezra's all about getting vengeance and trying to beat the people and destroy the empire and that kind of thing. And so it's all these themes, and they go to Malachor, and Ezra's like, oh yeah, we won. And they're like, no, just no one won. Everyone's turned to like ash. And it's this, episode where Ezra gets split, and it's about him finding a degree of connection with Maul. Now, I'm going to say it again. The Clone Wars gives you a lot more information about how on earth Maul got there, because we saw in Solo: A Star Wars Story that Maul was alive. I mean, all of us Clone Wars fans already knew that, but we knew, so all movie watchers know that Maul survived being cut in half in Phantom Menace. If you want to find out how, you have to watch Clone Wars, and I will say it's one of the best episode arcs in Star Wars. But you get to see Maul here, and he comes in. Now, Maff, because obviously Maul is in the poster for Star Wars Rebels on Disney Plus, which really annoys me. But when Maul was coming into it, did you expect Maul? Did you see him? Like, what was your initial thoughts when you first kind of came across formerly Darth Maul in the form of trying to be old master to Ezra and the kind of reveal for him?
I was aware, and I knew what was on Malachor. When the word Malachor got mentioned, I thought, I know that, and I was racking my brains, and I think it's mentioned in... it's either mentioned in Knights of the Old Republic, or it might be even mentioned in Force Unleashed.
I think it's the former. I think it's Knights of the Old Republic. It is a Legends thing, Malcolm.
Because I thought I recognise that, but I was aware that Maul was going to be in this. It was an interesting, because at first when you see is it the eighth brother?
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
Is that who? Is that going to be Maul? But he seems to be quite. I know he lost his legs, so but I'm aware that I think he has robot legs or something, which it doesn't really seem to show you anything. But then you then meet Maul, and again, he's very much kind of, he's already planned out that he's going to use these people to get what he needs. He knows he needs another Force user to be able to get into the temple, and Ezra's just easy picking. He wouldn't. I don't think Kanan would have worked with Maul, which it works out. The fact that they end up with a hologram. Is that a holocron, or is that something different with it being?
That's a Sith holocron. Yeah, so you can get Jedi holocrons and Sith holocrons.
Because the Jedi ones are more square, aren't they?
They're a cube. Yeah.
Yeah. Whereas that was more like a pyramid. But again, Ezra's always looking for the best in people, and I think that's his downfall more than anything else. He's always trying to help. He's always trying to look out for the little guy, because he was the little guy, and now that he's able to do something about these things, he's trying to. He's just a bit too forgiving of people, and that. But that interaction with Maul and Ezra is really good, and the fact that he's when he's starting to teach him, he says, you've got to use the dark side, you've got to use your anger, you've got to do this. Ezra's very easily persuaded that way, because there is a side of him there that's out for vengeance, and it's all right being all nicey, but it's not getting him anywhere. And I think that's frustrating Ezra, and that's why he's kind of right. Well, if I have to use this to get what I want, then that's what I'm going to do. And that, but I did like the interaction between Ezra and Maul as you go through, and then try to think now at what point all of a sudden then Vader comes along, doesn't he? Which kind of really messes things up. There wasn't really much, but I'm trying to remember what interaction Vader and Maul had.
They didn't.
Did he just kind of...
Ahsoka, so Ezra went up because Maul told him to go up with the holocron.
Yeah.
And then Maul blinded Kanan. Yes. Ahsoka follows Ezra because she knows that Vader's coming, and Kanan manages to push Maul off the top of the temple, the pyramid.
And then he escapes in the TIE fighter.
Yeah. So with that, if we pause there for a second, if we pivot to Dave, so your perception of Maul before sort of the big fighting finale and things like that, but him coming into it, I know obviously you've already knew he was coming, but when you originally watched it and you'll watch this time, what was your whole experience of Maul in these episodes?
I think I'd already watched Solo, so spoilers for Solo, but he shows up in the end of that, and I was just like, oh, fuck off. He got chopped in half. That's ridiculous. But, as soon as he shows up, again, it's one of those kind of tropes in cartoons, and comics do it as well, that, the baddie is fairly obvious. They'll represent him in a certain way. The fact that he's in this cloak, and quite hidden from the light a lot of the time. So it takes a bit of the episode before you actually see that he's it's Maul. And then definitely I agree with Maff about the dark side in Ezra showing through. And I don't know if, I guess they are trying to have some parallels with Anakin, but I don't think they're trying to be that subtle about it as well. They're seeing that, he could be swayed. And as Maff was talking there, I was thinking, you know what? It's kind of, especially the prequels Jedi, right? It's a very privileged position to be in. So you can sit in your fancy tower in Coruscant and just say, oh, turn the other cheek and all that, and you can do all of the right things. Ezra is essentially Aladdin in the Star Wars universe, and he's had a rough upbringing. He's had to make it on his own. He's had to make difficult choices. He's had to go on the opposite, the other side of the law. He's had to steal things to feed himself and whatever. So he kind of has to make decisions that people in that privileged position don't have to make. So it makes sense to me that he would have to wrestle with, whether the dark side or the light side is the right thing. And Maul is quite convincing, isn't he? Despite the almost mustache twirling nature of him, that you're going to turn, you bastard. We know you are. But yeah, I thought it was interesting, and you don't really get the full reveal that he's trying to turn him until he announces, he's my apprentice kind of thing. Or does he say? Does he say apprentice?
Yeah, he does, and then he blinds.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I thought that was his dastardly plan and stuff. So yeah, I think it was okay. I struggled to get over the fact that a dude who got chopped in half is now okay.
Yep.
And let's ignore the episode 9 with the Emperor and stuff. But yeah, I try and get over it, but I just can't.
It is one of those things in Star Wars. It's like George Lucas basically killed a character and he regrets doing it, so he brought him back. And it's like, it was pretty final. When you have Qui-Gon who's just stabbed through the stomach and he dies, and then you get Maul who's cut in half and he doesn't, and you're like,
and falls down an elevator shaft, essentially.
And you see what happens to him in Clone Wars, and you're like,
so did Luke.
Well, I mean,
Luke fell down a shaft.
Yeah, but he had his little hand cut off. He didn't have his legs gone.
But
there's all those organs all over the place. Think about all your stomach and everything.
It cauterizes the wound, in theory. So, I mean, you do get to see... I do think it's nonsense, but it's also like... People compare it to Anakin surviving at the end of Revenge of the Sith, where he has like no limbs and he's on fire and he's like barely alive. It's like, you shouldn't really, in theory, be able to survive that and being carried all the way and then operated on while you're awake and then in this suit and things. And it's meant to be the argument that if you have enough will in the dark side of the Force, and even if you're like less than an inch from death, if you have enough hate and anger and will, you can survive almost anything. But the state that you're normally left in afterwards is a mess. And we see that with Anakin with Vader. And we also see it in the Clone Wars because, Maul in this is not the same as when we find Maul shortly after the Phantom Menace. Let's put it that way. It's a radically different character. But Maul is actually one of my favourite Star Wars characters. I've got, and that's the Funko from Clone Wars where he has metal legs as well. So Maul is one of my favourites. When he came into it, as I said, I'm annoyed at Rebels marketing for having him in the poster, but I love characters that struggle with the dark side. I just think it's so much more interesting to me. I love, we've seen 1,000 redemption stories, but you don't actually really get to see a fallen hero story very often, or done well as often. That's one of the reasons I love, Revenge of the Sith so much, because it's such a gut punch. And with Ezra toying with those parts and some of his decisions causing some of the issues that occur is intense. But like, when you see Maul in action, you see a lot of it in Clone Wars, and there's some stuff in Clone Wars that you're like, how is this allowed in this kids animated show? This is brutal. But in this as well, when you see him fight the Inquisitors, he can basically take on all three at the same time and win. He like destroys them immediately, going straight in. And you're like, oh yeah, I forgot, because Maul is actually one of the greatest sword fighters in Star Wars history, in the canon at least. He's phenomenal. It's just that like, he beat Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan at the same time, and then individually. The only reason that he lost is because he got cocky about it. And so when you see him fight properly with a double-ended blade and see what kind of damage you can do when you're not holding back from the Force, Ahsoka's really the only person who you see in this who could really go tit for tat. Oh my god.
No.
Toe to toe or tit for tat, either or, both were. I couldn't say either of them. So seeing more in that, I love it. It's great. He's such an interesting character, and we get to see more from him. That's not the end of Maul in Rebels. But let's talk a little bit, before we get to Vader, let's talk a little bit about Kanan and Ahsoka here. So Kanan obviously gets blinded. That's one of the big things. And he wears the Jedi Temple mask, which is quite cool. I like that effect. Dave, what have you thought of Kanan and also Ahsoka in this part, just before we get to the crescendo of Vader?
So again, I feel like this is kind of the essence of this was born in Luke's hand being cut off. Mm-hmm. You know, you get someone in this sword fight maimed, permanently. And, we'll see later he doesn't just, it's not like a non-canon type throwaway thing. It's like, splash some water on my eyes and it's all okay. No, that's it. You get a lightsaber shoved in your face, not going to see again. So,
and it tackles that in the next season. It's not. Yeah. He doesn't just bounce back the first episode. It's not like, hey guys, I can't see. Yeah. It doesn't happen that way.
So yeah, I thought that was amazing, and I'd kind of forgot that happened so early. I that took me back a little bit, because I remember going through it all. I remember certain moments clearly, but then there's other bits, like when he gets blinded. I'd just forgotten it. It happened so soon. So yeah, that felt like it had a huge amount of weight to it. And I like the fact that, again, call back to original New Hope, where he's got the visor on, he's trying to figure out fighting without being able to see and stuff. So putting the mask on and stuff, getting his Zen self, to be able to fight and defeat Maul and stuff. So I thought that was fantastic.
Maff, any thoughts on the Kanan and Ahsoka before get to the Vader part?
It's funny how lightsabers can either cut through steel doors, but then if it just hits you just on the nose, it stops there and just blinds you and doesn't take his entire head off.
To be an apologist, I think the idea is Maul swiped for him, Kanan at the last second realised and pulled back, and the edges hurt him like that. I think that, because otherwise it would have literally, as you say, it would have cut him off from here. Yeah. So I think you saw Kanan react a split second as it came, kind of pull back. So I think it was a kind of, I like to think so anyway. You can just MacGuffin it, or maybe the force it was thrown with, it kind of bounced off almost. But
maybe, but again, the issue I have sometimes with the Jedi is the Jedi are very much kind of, they don't want to fight or anything, but they do fight. And then, whereas the Sith, now I don't know whether this is how Ahsoka is, because she's not a Jedi. Whether she can use both the dark and the light side of the Force. I hope they explore that with Ezra, because you can't have a light force without having some dark. If you're going to fight these wars, which is where I think hopefully Ezra they can build on that and show the fact that there's a fine line where you have to walk down, and use a bit of both sides. But watching Kanan fight Maul, Kanan's not a brilliant sword fighter, whereas Maul is really good, and Maul could have actually probably taken him out a lot quicker. And it seemed like he held back an awful lot. I'm not quite sure why, with that fight. But then obviously we have Ahsoka fighting, and Ahsoka's just, she's just something else. She really is. You see that Maul is, one of these, but I think Ahsoka can go toe to toe with anybody. Now, again, I don't know the full backstory of her, but I do see the fact that she's a force to reckon with. And then obviously there's the bit where Vader does come in, and Ahsoka kind of steps up. And again, considering she's fighting against this immense person, she really is good. But before that, obviously, we mentioned it before with Ezra, when Ezra's not scared of Vader, he steps up again. He's trying to do the right thing. He's trying to, let's save everybody kind of thing. And, considering Vader is so good, I think he's toying with Ezra an awful lot. He destroys his lightsaber, which that's obviously something that's going to be major in season 1 because Ezra has no lightsaber now. This is a problem that Disney does have. And I was aware that Kanan was going to get blinded because there's the image on the Disney Plus.
Mm-hmm.
You can see Kanan's eyes are kind of greyed out. So I thought, obviously, something's going to happen there. Same as Ezra's hair's all slicked back. So season 3 is probably going to, get.
It's going to be like Spider-Man 3. He's going to go all emo. And...
yeah. It's a shame they don't change as the season goes on different thumbnails. It's just, it's same as Sabine, her hair changes colour each season.
Mm-hmm.
And that, but yeah, if we're going to go into the Vader thing, Vader is just, once he turns up, you just realise that things are going to go sideways very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And if Ahsoka hadn't been there, that'd have been end of season 2 and the Rebels.
Yeah, it would have been. It'd be the end of the Jedi, at least. It's one of those with Vader that I find that, although he's obviously an incredible villain in the original trilogy, I find that a lot of the content, like whenever people say more Vader content, I'm always, even when he was announced for Obi-Wan Kenobi, I was like, I knew, I was like, do we really need more Vader? And then every single time I see him, I'm like, incredible. I'm listening to audiobooks where he's in. I've been listening to Thrawn Alliances, which is about a character called Thrawn, who was made famous in Legends. And it's about him interacting with Vader, and then him, 20 odd years earlier, 15, 20 years earlier, interacting with Anakin Skywalker around the Clone Wars sort of time. And you get to see Thrawn kind of figure out it's the same person. He's the only person who gets to do it. And it's like this whole dynamic he has with Vader, which is really interesting. And you get to see Vader just be badass in that book. And there's the comics as well, the 2015, 2017 and 2020 comics, where you get a taste of his power. But nothing quite does it. Like when you see it in Obi-Wan Kenobi in the village scene in episode 3, when he goes and he just kills so many people and he destroys Obi-Wan. And then when you see him in Rebels, and when you get to see him in the end of Jedi Fallen Order, the video game, like there's all these pieces of content that are showing, yeah, he lost, air quotes, he lost to Luke in episode 6, but that's only because Luke was the only person who could make him feel anything other than hatred and fear and anger. So because Luke stripped back some of the dark side power, he could then get bested. And that's essentially my interpretation of how that whole fight works. It's not that Luke is this great, unfathomable fighter. It's this taking Vader down, because, Luke is nowhere near as good of a fighter as so many other people we've seen face Vader. And that's my kind of opinion of that matter. So
but by that time as well, he was also more machine than man.
I mean, he is also, let's not forget, he's been Vader for like 20 years at that point. And he's not probably as strong as he was, sort of.
Probably past his prime a little bit.
Yeah, I imagine, especially the amount of beatings he gets.
I can relate to
that. So it's one of those, but seeing him in this show is another one of those things where when you get a normal level Jedi go against Vader, you don't win, you just survive. And that's what the opening of this season did. When Kanan and Ezra basically escape, and Ezra's like, what was that thing? He's like, we could have maybe beat him. And Kanan's like, you were lucky to survive against that thing. You have no idea. And then, as you said, Maff, Ahsoka comes into it, and Ahsoka is, in my opinion, she could defeat Obi-Wan. She could defeat Yoda. She could defeat, at this point, I think she could defeat relatively anyone.
Whoa, Yoda. Come on.
Yoda does.
Yoda starts going.
He doesn't beat
900
Palpatine.
Years old.
He doesn't. Yeah, he's 900 at that point. But like, he doesn't beat Palpatine. He loses to Palpatine. The only person we've seen beat Palpatine is Mace Windu. I don't know if Ahsoka could beat Palpatine. I think Mace could only do that because of his Vapard lightsaber style. But that's a whole other conversation. But Ahsoka is just incredible, and when her fighting with Vader, it's so powerful. It's so cool to watch. The lightsaber colors are amazing. The way it's choreographed. And the dialogue, the I'm no Jedi part, the bit where, Vader's mask comes off and you see Anakin there and you get that voice and you get that emotional moment, and it's just like, it's a gut punch. and it's just how it all unravels. So how did you feel about that, Maff, seeing this episode for the first time? We've spoken about all the little pieces. So this episode as a whole, from there to the Vader fight, how was it for you experiencing this element for the first time, even though you've seen similar story beats and other content?
I think that unfortunately spoiled it a little bit, seeing this in Kenobi. But I feel that this in Rebels hits better.
Mm-hmm.
That although there's obviously, there's a master and apprentice there with Ahsoka and with Vader. It feels more of a she's wanting to beat him, but at the same point there's that kind of this is my master. She doesn't want to kind of completely destroy him. Because she still believes there's good in him, which again, it's that storytelling of where Luke and Vader fight, and Luke still sees the good in his, he knows it's his dad. This, she gets to a point where she realizes, no, that this is it. There is no more, and we have to try to take him out, and that it. But you feel that fight going along with them, the fact that she has to sacrifice herself to be able to kind of save everybody else and take this guy out, because otherwise, like you said, this is going to be the end of the Jedi, because this guy's just going to wipe everybody out. These Inquisitors that have come along have been hard work for them to take on. This guy here is a whole nother level. And, like you said, the only person who can probably take him on is Ahsoka. None of the other guys, if they're going to, I know Ezra kind of stands up to him, but Vader's just, it's a bit of fun for him, really. And that, in spoilers for the Jedi Fallen Order, but you meet Vader in there, and you have two options there. One, you fight Vader, which means you're going to reload and, your previous save because you're going to die. Or option two, which is what you have to do, is you run away, because that's the only way to kind of survive. Kanan is so right, the fact that you don't beat him, you survive by getting away from him, because this guy is just on a whole nother level.
Mm-hmm.
But the fight between them both, now, I don't know, I've not looked into it, but it did sound when the music started, as them two started to fight, a little bit of Duel of the Fates. Kind of like, there seemed to be a rift of the Duel of the Fates there, as them two were starting to fight with each other with the music they were playing in the background. Now, again, it's been a bit of a day today. I was meant to try and look into that and re-listen to it, but I don't know. I don't know if anyone else picked up on that.
I mean, Duel of Fates is my favorite Star Wars anthem, but I think there was probably beats of it, but a lot of the Star Wars music sounds a lot like the Star Wars music, so it's kind of like it could have done, but the music was epic and incredible. And so with that, like, Dave, what did you think? Obviously, of especially, I mean, I've rewatched this, especially part 2. I've rewatched this many times. I've watched the Maul. Basically everything from this part. Like, I've watched this episode several times outside of a rewatch. Have you done that yourself, Dave? And also, what was your rewatch experience like on this part?
So first of all, before I launch into season 3, I will be watching these two again.
Yeah.
They're just so good. There's just so much going on there, but focusing in on that moment where you get Vader's mask cracked, I think I would say the first time I saw it and I thought, oh, that must be a nightmare, because these guys know each other, and but then you're on to the next thing, and like Ahsoka makes what seems to be a sacrifice, to let everyone get away, and Maff's completely right. I mean, Vader is a great white shark, and you've got a bleeding limb or something, you've fucked, basically, so just try and get out of there. But I have to say, I'm going to sound like one of those smug book readers who are like, oh, the film is nowhere near as good as the book. Having watched Clone Wars, right, gives that scene so much more weight because you have had 7 seasons to see that relationship, that master and apprentice relationship develop, and you sort of put yourself in Ahsoka's position. This is my mentor. This is my coach. This is the person who's given me all that great advice. This is that person that I've looked up to. And I thought, post Order 66, I thought was just probably slaughtered with the rest of the Jedi. Whereas this absolute beast, this scourge of the galaxy, is the person I looked up to and worshipped the most. And honestly, it hit me so much more, or so much harder the second time round watching it. It was unbelievable. And like I say, a proper gut punch. But I think having watched those 7 seasons of Clone Wars, I think leads you up to that position. So it is a proper gut punch.
And I think
you could even say he's supposed to be the chosen one.
You're like a brother. Oh, you're like a father, yeah. She should probably say.
Again, it's at similarities between so many different things where they're able to kind of, again, retell the story, but in a better way. And that, so it's got them beats of Star Wars that keep you coming back because it's that, that fight between Anakin and Obi-Wan, although some people say them first 3 aren't the best, which they're so. They've retold it in Kenobi, but they've retold it here as well. And again, I think it's told a lot better here than the previous 2. But there is that kind of, she sees the fact that he is the mentor. He is the guy that should be kind of, leading all these Jedi the right way. And he's just fallen so far. And she realizes the only way to kind of, deal with this is to make that sacrifice and try to take him out.
Yeah, I agree. It's one of those that I would encourage anyone, even though the order, I believe, should be Rebels then Clone Wars. Chronologically, Clone Wars is first, and I think the scene would mean more if you see Clone Wars first, but equally, I think it makes Clone Wars better in a lot of ways. It makes you kind of want to know how they got there. And then what I recommend to all people is, Rebels, Clone Wars, Tales of the Jedi and stuff. But after you finish Clone Wars, Series 7, you watch this episode again, this 2-parter, and as Dave said, it means so much more and there's so much more weight to it. And there's a few episodes of Rebels that I have rewatched specifically. There's one in Series 3 and there's 1 or 2 in Series 4, like just episodes that by themselves are just phenomenal. And so this is one of them. And this is just, I can't tell people why Rebels is amazing because I don't want to just be like, oh yeah, Rebels is amazing because Ahsoka fights Vader and then Maul comes into it and blinds Kanan. Like that would just ruin everything. But it's like, this episode is a culmination of everything from Clone Wars and a lot of Rebels kind of meshing together. And then from this point on, we get to see what happened because of this. Maul's still running around. Kanan's now blinded. What's happened to Ahsoka. And you get to find out what the more threats are as we get nearer to Rogue One territory, as we get nearer to A New Hope. And, there's some threads, there's some content, Rogue One, A New Hope, there are connective threads that come up. There's more surprises and incredible things that come up as Rebels goes on. And I'm so excited to be able to watch this as well, again, because I just love Rebels, as people can tell because I was gone about it. And then I won't be able to whinge. I won't be able to say not enough people watch it again when we finish this. I have to move on to moaning about something else that people aren't watching. But I think we've tackled relatively every element of this. I had a bit of information about lightsabers, but I'm not going to delve into that because I'll be here forever. But is there anything else that we have not yet tackled that we want to say as we start to wrap this up? Dave, you first, good sir.
I just want to say it's been great to listen to Maff kind of wax lyrical about how good it is and like the similar scenes that they stole in Kenobi, but it was done better here. I absolutely think that's right. And I thought, oh, we've got him here. He not only wants to watch season 3 soon, but wants to watch the Clone Wars as well. And that is, I think if someone dedicates the time to watch, and obviously you got to be a Star Wars fan, but if you are, and going back watching Rebels season 1 and then season 2, just for me is a level up from where you started as an old bloke watching it anyway. And so, yeah, it's just been really good. And I feel like this was the same when we did our season 1 recap. I feel like we just kind of skimmed the surface of 20 odd episodes, but it's been a great chat.
The thing is, we haven't mentioned like the B-wing. I mean,
oh yeah,
that was something awesome, and that. But there is so many. Like, I won't say they're not throwaway episodes, but they're them little episodes where in season 1 there was one with the where Hera and Sabine go on to the planet and they find them strange little creatures. I can't remember what they're called, but then that comes back further, and Ezra calls the Big Mama to take out the Grand Inquisitor, or to deal with him for that time. There's so many little things in here. I mean, we've not even mentioned Princess Leia, and that she's, sneaky, isn't she? And that
clever.
Lando.
Again, it shows how clever Leia is. She's obviously working on the Rebel Alliance side, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but having the ship stolen from an Imperial planet, I think it was, and it was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. So again, just something that it's the adults watching that would pick up on that. She's thinking politically, and she's almost thinking 3-dimensionally because she's playing this high stakes game that, she gets caught, she'll be held for treason. So I thought, even though it was a minor cameo, I thought that Leia episode was great. It
really showed the person she becomes in A New Hope.
Would you say at one point, because obviously when it all goes kind of, they steal the ships and then she's left with the admiral who's in charge of the captain who's in charge, she kind of says, and you're going to give me your ship. Do you think there's a bit of Jedi mind tricks there, or is she just being, commanding to him?
I think she's more being commanding. I think that the Jedi stuff is nice to think about, but unfortunately, Leia doesn't really show much aptitude for it. In the comics, there's a smidge. There's a tiny, tiny amount of it. But it's more so, I think, just how sort of Dave was saying, like, she's so clever. She's grown up in politics. She was taught by, Bail and Breha Organa. Obviously, we saw her in Kenobi as well when she was young. She's very switched on when she was young. And I really liked her in Kenobi, to be honest with you. I just thought it takes away dramatic tension because she's going to be fine. But more Leia content, I find, like, there's a book called Leia, Princess of Alderaan, written by Claudia Gray, which I have over here, and it's a great book. It's loads of fun, and it was one of those things of learning about her, kind of delve into the rebellion more, and getting to see how she has to start maneuvering when she realizes those things out. Those elements of what we saw with Leia here, again with what Dave said earlier, it links with what Andor is like, because Mon Mothma is playing that game, but Mon Mothma's been in the game a lot longer, and she's a lot older, and she's got a lot more attention on her than, a senator's daughter. And this show very, in this series, less so, but you get to see some of the political maneuvering as you kind of go along. So I want to ask Maff, what are you expecting or even hoping for in season 3 of Star Wars Rebels?
Ezra's going to have to make a new lightsaber. Now, is he going to calibrate it so he has the gun again still or not? But again, thank you, Disney, but you spoiled it, because I do believe that he has a certain coloured lightsaber. I won't say in case anyone is watching along like I am. But, it's a bit spoiled there. It's going to be interesting to see how Kanan kind of deals with the fact that he's been blinded. I don't expect him to become, Matt Murdock, and that. But there again, he's going to have to find a way to kind of work this round, and going to have to lean on other people more, which that seems to be Kanan's downfall. He doesn't like to kind of depend on other people. Again, I'd like to see a bit more of Zeb. We know there's a place where his people have gone to now, so maybe they'll delve into that. Sabine, it's strange because you see, we meet some Mandalorians in this, but then again, she's a bit of a mystery because although Kestra, again, when she turns up in it's the one with Harris' father in, kind of coming around shooting around, and that. And she just kind of does that kind of, hi, I'm here to save the day, and that. But again, maybe they'll delve into that relationship a bit more, and maybe she'll appear a bit more. So I'd like to see more of the other characters. I do feel that it's worked well to kind of focus so much on Ezra and Kanan, because to be fair, they're the focal point. To kind of, because Ezra's the focal point really to kind of take us along this journey. But I would like to see a little bit more of the others. Again, season 3 is a 22 episode, and then I know season 4 is 15. So, I mean, I think the downside I see, I know there's only 2 more seasons, and I feel there's so much more that's still to explore. You know, the purrgil, and that I'd like to know a bit more there. The fact that they kind of are able to, you know, jump space just because they can. You know, but again, my first experience of the purrgil was in The Mandalorian, when you see them kind of going along. It's like, what are they? And I know it got mentioned on the Mandalorian show, but then obviously getting to see them a lot more here. Again, they've answered questions and they've given us even more to kind of ponder now and hope to see, you know, and you know, whatever we're going to get in the in the third season, and that I just can't wait for. Which I probably won't start tonight because it's getting a bit late, but probably this weekend I'll be watching season 3 and going, right, when are we recording the next episode?
Yeah, I mean, with Sabine, we do touch on Mandalorian culture. You get to see the planet of Concord Dawn that's like split apart and destroyed, and it looks insane. And you get to see Fen Rao and him being like a Mandalorian, but they're working for the Imperials and things. And that just touched. That was like a tease. Again, a little tease. I will say, I can't remember specifically if it's series 3 or series 4, but one of the series very much focuses on Mandalorian culture. So
is Bo-Katan in this, or is she just in Clone Wars?
Well, if you watch, you'll find out, won't you? Let's just say from Clone Wars, something happens with her, and then something happens with her Mandalorian. And so there's some space in the middle, but how much or how little, if any, that happens, I wouldn't be able to confirm. You know, when you finish the last episode of Star Wars Rebels, you'll be like, you know what? It's done a nice neat little bow. You'll be like, every question that you were asking in series 1 and series 2, and probably in the next one, series 3, and you'll be like, I wonder what about this, and I wonder about this, I wonder about this. Pretty much everything you're going to question is going to be answered in some fashion.
If not, you'll be able to answer it anyway to me.
Yeah, but there's also 7 series of Clone Wars to watch as well on top of that, so that might have some of the answers that you seek. But is there anything, I mean, you mentioned Lando. Lando's episode was great. Loved seeing Lando. And it was Billy D. Williams again. You know, fantastic. I love him and everything he does. And yeah, I think the only other thing is a little bit of touching on is Kanan and Hera. I really like their relationship. It gets a bit more strained, but you get to see nice parts. And I really like that Kanan acts really weird around Hera's dad to begin with. When Cham Syndulla's there, and Ezra's like, "Why are you acting so weird?" And no one gets it, but you was kind of
weird. You're being weird.
Yeah, exactly. And you kind of, especially at the end, before he leaves for Malachor, you see them hug and look into the sunset and things, and you get this kind of the family dynamic. They're like the parents and their adopted kids and stuff. You get that, and once again, more things get explored. So very excited for Series 3. Any last things before we plug? Anything at all?
Just coming back to what Maff was saying about Kanan, I feel like he's still a believable character. I think Matthew was saying he kind of goes all petulant and stuff, but I see Kanan as being that reluctant master. Mentor, yeah. So he didn't ask for this. So basically, when Order 66 happened, he was a kid. He's, everything that he's been brought up to believe was suddenly wiped out. He's kind of been on the run pretty much and hiding who he is. And he feels like he's forced into this mentor role. So I kind of, that's how I was interpreting it, that, he's kind of rebelling against it, but then he's almost getting angry because I feel like Ezra is stronger with the Force, but he feels like a responsibility, and it's a weight of responsibility that if he doesn't impart all of his knowledge onto Ezra, he's going to get himself killed, because how do you recover from something like Order 66? I don't think you ever do. But that was a serious point. And then I think the less serious point was, I love the fact that I said I don't like Hondo. He's a bit of a chancer, but I'm going to be a hypocrite now and say I like the fact that Ezra is a bit of a chancer because he keeps throwing different names. So, when people ask who he is, like Jabba the Hutt. And so I appreciate that. And, when he fools someone and they're referring to him as Jabba the Hutt. I mean, again, that is an inside joke for all of us, isn't it? But I like it that it says about his character that he so quickly, will fall into that chancer kind of mode and just, I'm not going to tell him my real name, or I'll give him a false name.
Yeah, and it's not unbelievable that he wouldn't know about Jabba, because Jabba's the most famous Hutt. He's 600 years old. He's a crime lord that operates on the Outer Rim, and that's, Lothal is a desert-y planet on the Outer Rim, so it makes sense that he would have, in theory, heard of rumours of the gangster Jabba the Hutt as well. So it's like, it works both as a little nod to the audience, obviously, as that's what it primarily is, but in universe it works as well. And you get an episode here about where Ezra learns his parents are actually gone. And that's like a really brutal episode again for a kid's show.
It was, yeah.
It's just like him, for the last 5 minutes, and basically he's moping around, understandably, because it's horrendous. But it's just like, this is a lot for a kid's show. Talk about loss, the death of both of your parents. It's not a Pixar movie, but there's just
Disney now, isn't it? So
yeah, I know. I think when this was being made was when the takeover started to happen. So it was kind of one of the first pieces of under the banner of Disney content, but it's still got a lot of the veins of Clone Wars because of Filoni and the other members of the team. But yeah, I love Series 2. I love the stuff that it's touched. Chopper's amazing, as he always is. He's a massive dick, but it's great.
He's basically he's R2-D2 on cocaine, Chopper, isn't he? Yeah. I love him.
It's great. It's such a fun thing, and we got to see another little R2 and 3PO cameo because of Leia, that episode as well. But yeah, I think we'll probably wrap up unless the final thoughts. Anything else to add, Maff? You're looking at your notes.
I know
everything.
You didn't really want to get into it, so I was just going to say the bit where Kanan, there's a crossguard. One of the lightsabers that is shown on there. There's a crossguard lightsaber, which obviously we get if you play the games, Jedi Survivor. You can see it in there, but also that's for
Kylo
Ren uses. But yeah, I did feel the same as what Dave said. It felt very Matrix, that kind of the room that there was fighting in.
Yeah.
But all in all, I mean, the season it's got better than previous season, and I'm going to hold my expectations a little bit, but if season 3 is better and season 4 is better, then, as I say, I can't wait to start them.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've got this little book here, which is the little book of lightsabers, mini book of lightsabers. It's great. It's got loads of different lightsabers in here. One of them is actually that ancient crossguard lightsaber that he picks up, and it gives you a little bit of like bio information on it. And this has got everyone's lightsabers in there, and it's even got some High Republic stuff. It's got the variety of lightsabers that, like, you know, Anakin had one in episode 1, and then had a different one from episode 2, from episode 2 and then episode 3. It's got both of Obi-Wan's lightsabers. It's got Ezra's lightsabers, Ahsoka's, loads of really cool stuff in there. So that just made me think of, because you mentioned the ancient crossguard, and I love seeing that, any old lore. But this is where we shall end it. We'll do some plugs and things. But yeah, I loved this. It was so much fun rewatching. Can't wait for Series 3. Can't wait for Series 4. And it's just making me all the more excited for Ahsoka as well. So, Maff, where can people find you?
I'm on Twitter at MaffUK78. That's kind of it. I just pop up on shows every once in a while. Hopefully, I might get invited to go do an Ahsoka show.
If you're a good boy and you finish your homework and finish Series 4 of Rebels by the time Ahsoka comes out, then yeah, of course.
I will do. I promise.
And Dave, you're up to a lot of different things, but tell people where they can find you and stuff that you're doing at the moment.
Yeah, so I'll just say first, I also can't wait to get into season 3. But also getting a bit emotional just even thinking about it. So almost want to hold off on it as well. So yeah, you can get me at Seattle Dojos on Twitter. You can also get me on the VHS Strikes Back podcast, and also Chris and Dave's reality TV cast, where we will not be doing a daily Love Island podcast, but we'll figure something different out about that. And we keep threatening, Chris and I keep threatening to come back and do some TV and movie reviews for Comics in Motion. We've been talking about doing Shazam and Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which, spoiler alert, is amazing. Eternals, of course, yeah.
The Flash is coming out. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Yeah. You guys have got enough content now that you're going to be able to do months of podcasts.
I think that was the problem, though. I mean, it essentially, with all of the content, killed us off. Because it's like, how can you possibly keep up? But
yeah, no, you're doing daily Love Island episodes and things.
That also, I was saying before we started that we're doing 10 episodes a week of that. So, yeah, but we won't be doing that. But at some point, we will make our re-comeback on Comics in Motion as well. So, yeah,
I think your comeback has to be Eternals or Hitmonkey.
I don't know if you're going to get Chris to watch Hitmonkey.
Hitmonkey, yeah.
Whereas getting him to watch a film is a lot easier.
This is Chris's. Yes, I am definitely going to watch this. I do like to rib him occasionally on that one.
He has seen Eternals, though, hasn't he? I think
he has.
I don't know if you're going to get him to watch it again, though, and I think that you have to watch it again to do the review on it. It's like, I want to rewatch it, but even though I didn't like it.
I actually want to get him to watch. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, man.
I would say it's not good, but it is slightly better the second time, I would say.
It feels to me like a DC movie that's placed in the MCU. I honestly didn't think it was that as bad as it got slated for being.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think Iron Man 2, right, got absolutely panned at the time. You go back now and watch Iron Man 2, and you'll see so many of the seeds that bear fruit later on. I think I'm hopeful, because we've not seen them yet, but I'm hopeful the seeds that are planted in Eternals will bear fruit later on. Because we've got a big fucking Eternals sticking out there out of the ground, don't we? What I actually do want to get Chris to watch for comics is Dr. Mordred, which is like a 90s Doctor Strange ripoff, which is horrendous. But I think that might be the comeback. But we'll see.
You have to start taking the reality cast hostage. You have to be like, look, I'm only doing these episodes of this. If you watch, for every random reality show you watch, you have to be like, right, you have to then watch one Marvel movie and we do one Marvel podcast. That is what the deal has to be going forward, because there's quite a few that you haven't done yet, and we got more coming.
So I not to dwell on this point, right? But I think we've also had that same hangover that the Globe has had with the MCU, right? So Endgame was such a build-up and such a crescendo. It's almost like you're coming down the other end of the bell curve then. It's like, how the hell do you follow that up? And seems to be not very well. However, what I would say
trying
is...
to reboot, aren't they? In a way.
Just, I always say, right, people can be fans of it or not, but there has never been in cinema 22 coherent movies that all are connected and all build up to the same thing. I love the X-Men. They are my first love and my forever love. But the first trilogy of those movies couldn't even keep continuity with themselves. You know what I mean? It's like, it's awful in terms of continuity. And then they tried to correct it and then fucked it up again. But anyway, so to have 22 movies that all led to something, that were all connected, that didn't reboot. We didn't have 6 different Batmans. This was one thing, broadly the same actors, not totally. It was something that cinema had never done before. So how the hell do you follow that up? And so I just think that they were onto a loser, whatever they did. And I think actually focusing on some standalone movies, I mean, if you think about it, like the Spider-Man movie, where you got all the different got Tobey Maguire, you got Andrew Garfield turning up, fuck-a-doodle-doo. I get goosebumps now just thinking about when Andrew Garfield turns up in particular. So we've had some really good movies, but we've also had some disappointments, but also because people revise, they're revisionists. Once you got to Infinity War and Endgame, you think, fucking Thor 2, that was great, wasn't it? No, it wasn't.
No.
It wasn't really, but we didn't have the expectations back then. So, yeah, I think at some point we'll get over our hangover and just get back on the horse.
Yeah, I mean, I've just got another one, Ant-Man 3. Says, Thor 4, Ant-Man 3. Wait, did you do it on Thor 4?
No.
Thor 4, Ant-Man 3, then you've also got Shazam.
Again, I didn't hate those movies, but I know there's not a lot of love for them.
I've liked every MCU film I've seen so far. Eternals was my least favourite of the newest phase, but I've enjoyed them. But we're not talking about that, funny enough. This is actually a Star Wars podcast, Star Wars Rebels, in fact. So I'll wrap this up.
It's our Disney overlords, isn't it? It's all connected. It's all
connected. Shared universe. But a Star Wars one isn't chronological, so you can just dip in and out wherever you want. It's one of my favourite bits about it. People are like, there's so much Star Wars content. It's like, you don't have to start anywhere. You can just start with Rebels. You could start with Clone Wars. You can start Mandalorian. I don't care. Just whatever you want. But friend, you can find me on social media at Genuine Chit-Chat on Twitter, Instagram, and on Facebook. You can support me on Patreon if you desire. You can support me on Coffee as well if you want to do a little one-off donation. And if you want to do that, I will send you a couple episodes of Afterthoughts as well as a little thank you. But yeah, support me on Patreon. You get access to every single episode of Afterthoughts, including Star Wars Legends book reviews, lots of stuff with myself and Meg on watching TV series and fun things there. We've done Guardians of the Galaxy 1, 2, and 3. Did a rewatch of that recently. Lots of cool things over there. But you can support this show. Subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/genuinechitchat. Share the show with your friends. Rate and review. Subscribe to Comics in Motion. It's all good, fun stuff. But friends, thank you so much for listening. Please tell us what you thought of Rebels reviewed, our episode, as well as your review of Star Wars Rebels Series 2. Tell us if you're watching Series 3. You're going to delve into that with us, and we'll rejoice in about a month's time for that specific series. Maff is chomping at the bit to be able to watch those, and then me and Dave will probably watch a couple, forget about it, and then binge several episodes a couple weeks before. Or Maff's been waiting there for like weeks for us to get it done. But friends, thank you so much. Thank you to Dave and Maff for taking up 2 hours of the evening to chat Star Wars. I always love it, and I'm so happy I could get, especially you, Maff. I know I got you into it, Dave, a little while ago, but now I've got Maff into Rebels. Makes me so happy. So friends, thank you again, and as always, may the Force be with you.